A crowded security checkpoint, a first-class boarding line, a young black woman in a college hoodie just trying to get home, and a security officer drunk on his own authority who decides she doesn't belong. A single violent shove is all it takes to set a catastrophe in motion. But Senior Security Officer Thomas Brewer made one critical mistake. He had no idea that the girl he just assaulted is Dorothy Andrea. And her father, Marcus Andrea, doesn't just fly first class. He owns the entire damn airline. And he's waiting at the destination. The air in Chicago O'Hare International Airport's Terminal 1 was thick with a familiar stale energy. A mixture of jet fuel, anxiety, and overpriced coffee. It was the frantic humming pulse of 1,000 different stories colliding at once. For 19-year-old Dorothy Andrea, her story was simple. She was exhausted. She was flying solo from Chicago to Los Angeles to finally escape the brutal week of midterm exams at Northwestern University. And these last 3 days had pushed her to the edge. All she wanted was to get to her seat, 2A, a first-class suite on Overland Airways, and sleep until they touched down at LAX. She adjusted the headphones around her neck, pulling the hood of her gray Northwestern sweatshirt further over her head. She was dressed for comfort, not for style. Dark jeans, worn Converse sneakers, and her father's old sweatshirt from his Howard University days. She clutched her phone and boarding pass in one hand, her carry-on resting by her feet. The security area for Overland Airways departures was a microcosm of societal hierarchies. The standard security lanes were a sprawling, chaotic mass of families, budget travelers, and stressed-out business flyers shuffling through their shoes and laptops. And then, separated by a sleek chrome stanchion and navy velvet rope, was the priority lane, a sliver of expedited privilege for first-class and Overland elite members. Presiding over this checkpoint, Station 7, was Senior Security Officer Thomas Brewer. Brewer was a man who wore his 15 years of TSA service like a badge of divine authority. His graying hair was cut military short. His jaw was set in a permanent clench of suspicion. His eyes were cold, calculating, scanning the crowd like a predator selecting prey. And his hand never strayed far from the radio clipped to his belt. His direct line to backup, to power, to the institutional weight that made him untouchable. Or so he believed. Terminal 1 at Chicago O'Hare was a war zone on this Wednesday afternoon before Thanksgiving. Every gate, every corridor, every square inch of polished floor was claimed by the annual migration of Americans desperate to get home. Families with screaming toddlers. College kids dragging overstuffed duffel bags. Business travelers barking into Bluetooth headsets. The announcement system was a relentless assault of gate changes and final boarding calls that nobody could distinguish anymore. It all blended into white noise, the soundtrack of controlled chaos. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Dorothy Andrea shuffled forward in the security line, her Northwestern backpack cutting into her shoulders. 3 all-nighters in 5 days. 2 term papers. 1 calculus exam that had nearly broken her. Her mind was a fog of exhaustion and relief. Finals were done. She was going home. Her dad had texted her that morning. "Can't wait to see you, sweetheart. Your room is ready, and I'm taking the whole weekend off." And that message had been the only thing keeping her upright for the past 6 hours. She glanced at her boarding pass on her phone. Overland Airways Flight 447 to Los Angeles. Seat 2A. First class. Her father had upgraded her ticket without asking, the way he always did. Dorothy had learned to stop protesting years ago. Marcus Andrea didn't do anything halfway, especially when it came to his daughter's comfort. The crowd ahead began to split like a river around a stone. On the left, the standard security lanes stretched back 50 deep, a grim assembly line of belt removal and laptop extraction. On the right, cordoned off by navy velvet ropes and a gleaming chrome stanchion, was the premium security lane. Maybe 7 people waited there, most of them in tailored suits and designer luggage, checking their Rolexes with practiced impatience. Dorothy moved toward the premium entrance, fishing her phone out to show her first-class boarding pass. That's when Thomas Brewer's radar pinged. He was stationed at the checkpoint entrance, his favorite post because it gave him maximum visibility and control. From here, he could see everything, judge everything, correct everything, And right now, he was watching a young black girl in a ratty college sweatshirt and sneakers that had seen better days trying to cut the line. Brewer's jaw tightened. 15 years on this job had taught him to spot the fakers, the hustlers, the people who thought they could game the system. They always had tells. The nervous glance. The defiant posture. The clothes that screamed, "I don't belong here, but I'm going to try anyway." This girl had all of them. She was moving with that particular brand of entitlement that Brewer had come to despise. Hood up. Headphones on. Not even bothering to look apologetic about skipping past hundreds of people who'd been waiting in the real line. These kids today, they thought the rules didn't apply to them. Thought they could flash a fake boarding pass or play dumb and get waved through by some pushover agent. Not on Thomas Brewer's watch. He stepped directly into Dorothy's path, his hand already moving to his radio. His voice carried that particular tone of authority he'd perfected over the years, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, sharp enough to make people stop and stare. "Ma'am, this lane is for first-class passengers only." Dorothy stopped, her tired brain taking a moment to process. She pulled one earbud out and looked up at the security officer blocking her path. He was maybe 6 feet tall, solid build, with a face carved from granite and suspicion. His name tag read T. Brewer, Senior Security Officer. "Ah, yes, I know," Dorothy said, offering a small, polite smile. "I am first class. Seat 2A, Overland Airways Flight 447. She held up her phone, the digital boarding pass glowing on the screen. Brewer didn't even glance at it. His eyes remained fixed on her face, then traveled deliberately down to her sweatshirt, her worn sneakers, back up to the hood still partially covering her hair. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back to the regular security line." Dorothy's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I have a first-class ticket. Look, it's right here." "Ma'am." Brewer's voice grew louder, more clipped. "I don't need to look at anything. This is a premium lane for premium passengers. Now please step aside before you hold up the line." Behind Dorothy, the line was beginning to back up. A man in a charcoal Tom Ford suit checked his Patek Philippe watch with an exaggerated sigh. A woman with a Hermes Birkin bag whispered something to her husband, both of them staring at Dorothy with barely concealed irritation. "Sir, with respect, I am a premium passenger." Dorothy kept her voice steady, even as her heart began to pound. "If you'd just scan my boarding pass. Don't get aggressive with me, young lady." Brewer took a half-step closer, his hand moving to rest on his radio. The gesture was deliberate, practiced. A threat disguised as protocol. Dorothy felt something cold spread through her chest. She wasn't being aggressive. She was barely above a whisper. But she knew exactly what was happening. She'd seen this movie before. Her father had warned her about moments like this. "Stay calm, stay polite, don't give them ammunition," he'd always said. "I'm not being aggressive," Dorothy said carefully. "I'm trying to show you my ticket." "What's the holdup?" the Tom Ford suit man called from behind. "Some of us have connections to make." "Just checking this young lady's documentation, sir," Brewer replied without taking his eyes off Dorothy. Then quieter, just for her. "You know what I think? I think you saw people using this lane and figured you'd try your luck. Maybe you've got a basic economy ticket. Maybe you don't have a ticket at all." "That's ridiculous," Dorothy said, her voice cracking slightly. "I just want to get through security. See, that's what concerns me. That attitude." Brewer's hand moved to his radio. "You're getting confrontational. Now I'm going to ask you one more time to step back to the appropriate line, or I'm going to have to call for police assistance." "Police?" Dorothy's voice pitched higher. "For what? I haven't done anything wrong." An older couple in the premium line, the man in a Brioni suit, the woman dripping in Cartier, exchanged knowing looks. The woman leaned toward her husband, not bothering to lower her voice. "They always think the rules don't apply to them." Her husband nodded sagely. "Officer, we'd appreciate it if you'd handle this quickly. We've been traveling since 5 this morning." Brewer's jaw set with vindication. "I understand completely, sir. This won't take long." He unclipped his radio, his eyes never leaving Dorothy's face. "This is Brewer at Checkpoint 7. I need a supervisor and police backup for a disruptive passenger attempting to access a restricted lane." Dorothy's hands were shaking now. "Wait, no, please just look at my boarding pass." "Ma'am, Put your hands where I can see them, and step back from the checkpoint. Dorothy's exhaustion cracked into desperation. Please, just scan it. Just scan my pass. She moved forward, not toward Brewer but around him, reaching toward the boarding pass scanner where a younger TSA agent stood frozen, watching the confrontation unfold. That's when Brewer's hand shot out. The shove was hard, deliberate, two-handed against Dorothy's shoulders. She stumbled backward, her feet tangling, her backpack shifting her center of gravity. For one suspended moment she was airborne. Then she hit the polished terminal floor with a crack that echoed through the checkpoint. Her backpack twisted beneath her. Her phone flew from her hand and skittered across the floor, coming to rest face down 5 feet away. Her left wrist, thrown out to break her fall, bent at an angle that sent white-hot pain shooting up her arm. Her belongings scattered like shrapnel: wallet, chapstick, her Northwestern student ID, the protein bar she'd saved for the flight. The collective gasp from the crowd was sharp, immediate. Then came something worse. Silence. The kind of silence that happens when people witness something terrible and have to decide in real time whether to be witnesses or bystanders. Dorothy lay there, sprawling and stunned, her wrists throbbing, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Around her, dozens of travelers stared. Nobody moved. Well, the Cartier woman said, her voice carrying across the checkpoint with crystal clarity. These kids today think they can just do whatever they want. No respect for authority. Her husband nodded, already turning back to his carry-on. Officer was just doing his job. Dorothy pushed herself up with her good hand, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. She crawled toward her phone, picked it up with shaking fingers. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks radiating from the corner, a starburst of damage that made the display barely readable. But she could still see the boarding pass. Still see seat 2A, first class, through the fractured glass. Miguel. Brewer's voice cut through the silence, directed at the younger TSA agent who'd been frozen by the scanner. Scanner pass. The younger agent, his name tag read M. Santos, looked between Brewer and Dorothy with visible discomfort. He took the phone from Dorothy's trembling hand with careful gentleness, held it under the scanner. The machine beeped. Green light. Approved. Overland Airways Flight 447 to Los Angeles, Miguel read from his screen, his voice quiet. Seat 2A. First class. Passenger name, Andrea Dorothy M. The silence returned, heavier now. Brewer's expression didn't change. Not even a flicker of recognition, remorse, or recalibration. He simply shifted his stance, squaring his shoulders. Doesn't matter. She became combative. She physically attempted to push past a federal security officer. That's a serious offense. I didn't, Dorothy's voice broke. She was still on the floor, cradling her wrist. I'm flagging her for additional screening. Brewer keyed his radio again. Santos, full secondary screening. Every item. Full pat-down. Protocol 7. Miguel's face registered something between protest and resignation, but he nodded. What happened next was designed to break her. Dorothy was hauled to her feet by a female TSA agent who'd materialized from somewhere, her touch professional but impersonal. Her backpack was dumped onto a steel table. Every book, every piece of clothing, every personal item pulled out and examined while passengers in the premium lane glided through security in less than 3 minutes. The pat-down happened in full view of everyone. Arms out, legs spread, hands running along her sides, her legs, her waistband. Dorothy stared at the ceiling, trying to disappear into herself, while business travelers rushed past with barely a glance. Brewer watched it all, arms crossed, vindicated. 20 minutes later, Dorothy was finally cleared. She repacked her belongings with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, trying to fold her clothes back into some semblance of order while her wrist screamed in protest. A pair of underwear had fallen to the floor. She picked it up, her face burning, and shoved it deep into her backpack while a businessman waiting for his own screening looked away with elaborate disinterest. She was trying not to cry, trying so hard, but her vision kept blurring, and she had to keep blinking it clear because she couldn't let them see her break. Not here. Not in front of all these people who'd already decided what kind of person she was. Behind her, Brewer was on his radio again. His voice carried just far enough for Dorothy to hear fragments. Disruptive passenger. Overland 447. Requested last boarding. Just be aware. Dorothy's stomach dropped. He wasn't done. She shouldered her backpack. The strap cutting into her shoulder felt like penance now, and began the long walk through Terminal 1 toward her gate. Every step felt exposed. She was hyper-aware of eyes tracking her movement. A mother pulled her child slightly closer as Dorothy passed. 2 gate agents stopped their conversation to watch her walk by, their expressions unreadable. She felt branded. Marked. As if Brewer had pinned a scarlet letter to her chest. Troublemaker. Aggressive. Doesn't belong. Gate B12 was a standard Overland Airways gate, all navy blue signage and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. The Boeing 787 sat waiting, sleek and promising escape. Dorothy approached the desk where 2 gate agents stood preparing for boarding. The nameplate on the counter read, Rachel Kim, Senior Gate Agent. Before Dorothy could say anything, she noticed movement in her peripheral vision. Brewer. He'd followed her. He was approaching the gate desk from the other side, his radio in hand, already talking to Rachel in tones too quiet for Dorothy to hear. But she could see him pointing at her, gesturing. Rachel's expression shifted from professional neutrality to careful concern. Rachel turned to Dorothy as she approached. Her smile was sympathetic but strained. Ms. Andrea, I'm going to need to ask you to wait until final boarding, please. Just as a precaution. A precaution for what? Dorothy's voice came out smaller than she intended. I'm sorry, miss. It's just protocol when security raises a concern. Dorothy wanted to argue. Wanted to demand to know what concern, what protocol, what possible justification there was for any of this. But she could feel Brewer watching from across the gate area, arms crossed again, triumphant. And she was so tired. So completely, utterly tired. Okay, she whispered. She found a seat in the corner, as far from the other passengers as possible. Boarding began 15 minutes later. Group 1 filed past, the premium passengers Brewer had protected so diligently. Some glanced at her. Most didn't. Dorothy sat with her backpack clutched in her lap like a shield, watching everyone else board her flight while she waited, isolated and marked. Her wrist was swelling now, a dull purple bruise spreading across the joint. She pulled out her cracked phone, wincing as she navigated the splintered screen. The camera still worked. She photographed her wrist from multiple angles. The phone screen. The scattered items still visible in her backpack that hadn't been repacked properly because her hands were shaking too badly. Then she opened her messages and found her father's contact. Marcus Andrea. The contact photo showed him smiling, proud, at her Northwestern graduation ceremony last year. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Part of her didn't want to burden him. Didn't want to be the girl who couldn't handle herself. But another part, the part that was 19 and hurt and humiliated, just wanted her dad. She typed quickly before she could change her mind. Dad. Something happened at O'Hare. I'm okay, but I need you to know. Security officer assaulted me at checkpoint. Said I didn't belong in first class. Shoved me to the ground. Broken phone, hurt wrist. They made me go through extra screening even after my ticket was valid. I'm scared. I'm boarding now. See you in LA. She attached the photos. Hit send. And waited for her name to be called. 300 miles west, in a corner office on the 15th floor of Overland Airways headquarters overlooking Los Angeles International Airport, Marcus Andrea was reviewing third-quarter revenue projections. The conference room was all glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the runways where his planes took off every 90 seconds. 14 executives sat around the mahogany table, listening to the CFO explain why their Pacific routes were outperforming expectations by 18%. Marcus's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced down out of habit, saw Dorothy's name on the screen. His expression softened immediately, the transformation that always happened when anything involved his daughter. The CFO paused mid-sentence, recognizing the shift. Go ahead, Tom, Marcus said, picking up his phone. I'm listening. But his eyes were already scanning Dorothy's message. The first read was confusion. The second was comprehension. The third was fury so cold and absolute that it could have flash-frozen the room. His fingers swiped through the photos. The spiderwebbed phone screen. Dorothy's wrist, swollen and bruised, the skin already darkening to purple. The timestamp, 47 minutes ago. Location, O'Hare Terminal 1, Security Checkpoint 7. He read her words again. Security officer assaulted me at checkpoint. Said I didn't belong in first class. Shoved me to the ground. Around the table, the conversation had died. 14 executives watched Marcus Andrea's face transform from the warmth of a father reading his daughter's message to something else entirely. Something glacial. The man who'd built Overland Airways from a regional carrier with 6 planes into an international powerhouse with a fleet of 87 aircraft was no longer in the room. In his place sat something harder, sharper, capable of dismantling entire careers with a phone call. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. He stood, phone in hand. "This meeting is over." The CFO blinked. "Sir, we still have the Asia-Pacific expansion to." "Over." Marcus was already moving toward the door. His assistant, Jennifer Park, was outside the conference room before he reached it, her tablet already in hand. She'd worked for Marcus Andrea for 11 years. She knew that tone. "Clear my afternoon," Marcus said, not breaking stride as he headed toward his office. "Get me Gerald Moss, Sharon Way, and Chief Ramirez at LAX. I want them in my office or on the phone in the next 10 minutes. "Yes, sir." "What should I tell them it's regarding?" Marcus stopped at his office door, turned to face her. "Tell them there's been an incident involving my daughter. Tell them I need our chief legal officer, our head of corporate security, and the LAPD airport division commander. And tell them it's urgent." Jennifer's face went pale. "Is Dorothy?" "She's physically okay." But someone decided to put their hands on her. He disappeared into his office, the door closing behind him with a soft, final click. Inside, Marcus pulled up Dorothy's passenger record on his computer. Flight 447, Chicago to LAX. Seat 2A. Boarding pass issued at 2:47 p.m. Central. He cross-referenced the security checkpoint logs. O'Hare contracted their security to Transsecure Solutions, a third-party firm Overland used at several airports. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling access codes he rarely used but never forgot. Security camera footage requests, flagged priority. Personnel files. Contractor records. Thomas Brewer. Age 45. 15 years with Transsecure. Assigned to O'Hare Terminal 1, Security Checkpoint 7. For complaints on file, all dismissed. 2 commendations. Marcus stared at the personnel photo. Stared at the man who'd shoved his daughter to the ground. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Andrea? Mr. Moss is on line 1. Ms. Way is on her way up. Chief Ramirez will call back in 5 minutes. Marcus picked up the phone. "Gerald," he said quietly, "that man put his hands on my daughter. I want him to understand exactly what he's done." Final boarding call for Dorothy Andrea, Flight 447 to Los Angeles. Dorothy stood, shouldering her backpack one more time. The gate area was nearly empty now, just Rachel Kim at the desk and a few stragglers rushing down the concourse. And Brewer. Still there. Still watching. She walked toward the jetway entrance, head down, just wanting this nightmare to end. As she passed him, Brewer leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Behave yourself up there, miss." The smile he gave her was small, smug, proprietary. The smile of a man who'd won and knew it. Dorothy didn't respond. Couldn't respond. She just walked past him into the jetway, each step feeling like walking underwater. The Boeing 787's first-class cabin was everything she should have been excited about. 8 seats in a 1-2-1 configuration, each one a private suite with a sliding door, lie-flat bed, personal entertainment screen. Seat 2A was by the window, wrapped in cream leather that probably cost more than her entire semester's tuition. Under any other circumstances, Dorothy would have been texting her roommate photos, marveling at the amenity kit, feeling like she'd stepped into a different world. Instead, she felt numb. The flight attendant, her name tag read Christine, greeted Dorothy with professional courtesy that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ms. Andrea, welcome aboard. Can I take your bag?" "I've got it, thank you." Christine's smile was thin. "Of course. Let me know if you need anything." The subtext was clear. Brewer's warning had preceded her. "Problem passenger. Watch this one." Dorothy sank into her seat, tucking her backpack under the ottoman. Across the aisle in seats 1A and 1B, the Hendersons were settling in, the same couple from the security line. The woman was arranging her Hermes bag in the overhead compartment with meticulous care. Her husband was already on his phone, bourbon in hand. "I'm telling you, Margaret," he said, not bothering to lower his voice, "the standards are absolutely slipping. You pay premium prices, and you get seated next to anyone these days." Margaret made a sympathetic noise. "It's not what it used to be. Not at all." Dorothy closed her eyes, willing herself invisible. The plane began to fill with the remaining first-class passengers, investment bankers, tech executives, a woman in Chanel who immediately pulled out a MacBook Pro. Normal people doing normal things, while Dorothy sat frozen in her leather cocoon, feeling like an imposter who'd been caught. The engine spooled up. The cabin door closed. Flight 447 pushed back from the gate. Dorothy tried to sleep. The seat reclined perfectly, the cabin lights dimmed to a soothing amber. The gentle hum of the engines should have been lulling. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Brewer's face. Felt his hands shoving her backward. Heard the crack of her phone hitting the floor. She stared out the window instead, watching Chicago fall away beneath them, the city lights spreading out like a circuit board. Somewhere down there, Brewer was probably heading home, proud of a job well done. Probably telling his wife about the entitled kid he'd put in her place today. Dorothy's mind ran loops she couldn't stop. Should she have been more assertive? Less assertive? Should she have demanded a supervisor immediately? Should she have stayed completely silent? If she'd worn different clothes, jeans instead of joggers, a blouse instead of a sweatshirt, would he have even stopped her? The shame was the worst part. The internalized, insidious shame that whispered maybe she'd done something wrong. Maybe she'd been too defensive, too aggressive. Maybe if she'd been more polite, more deferential, more what? A small voice in her head demanded. More submissive? More willing to accept discrimination? But the shame didn't listen to logic. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for landing." Dorothy opened her eyes. Through the window, Los Angeles sprawled beneath them, a vast grid of lights stretching from the Pacific to the mountains, the 405 and 10 freeways ribbons of red and white. Home. Almost. She should have felt relief. Instead, her stomach twisted with anxiety. She was going to have to explain this to her father. Show him her wrist, her phone, tell him the story of how she'd been humiliated in front of hundreds of people. He'd be supportive, she knew he would, but he'd also see his daughter hurting, and that would hurt him, and the cycle of pain would just expand. The landing gear deployed with a hydraulic thump. Dorothy gripped the armrests, her bruised wrist protesting. The runway lights streaked past the window, then the gentle touchdown, the reverse thrust, the taxi toward the terminal. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles International Airport, where the local time is 6:47 p.m. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we've reached the gate and the captain has turned off the seatbelt sign." Dorothy waited. Watched the ground crew position the jetway. Listened to the engine spool down. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Immediately, the cabin erupted in the standard choreography of arrival. Overhead bins clicking open, passengers stretching, the rustle of coats and bags. The Hendersons were first up, naturally, Mr. Henderson pulling down their matching Toomey luggage with exaggerated importance, while his wife reapplied lipstick in a compact mirror. Dorothy stood slowly, favoring her good wrist as she reached for her backpack. Her legs felt unsteady after sitting so long, or maybe from the adrenaline that had been coursing through her system for the past 4 hours finally wearing off. She joined the shuffling queue toward the exit, desperate to get off this plane and into her father's arms and maybe, finally, let herself cry. The aircraft door opened. Cool evening air and the smell of jet fuel flooded in. The Hendersons swept out first, not looking back. 2 other passengers followed. Dorothy was next. She reached the aircraft door where Christine, the senior flight attendant, stood with her practiced farewell smile. But as Dorothy approached, Christine's hand came up, polite but firm. "Miss Andrea, please wait here for a moment." Dorothy's heart stopped. "What? If you could just step aside, please." Christine gestured to the galley area. "Let the other passengers deplane first." Blood rushed in Dorothy's ears. "Not again. Not here." "Why? What's wrong?" "There are some people who need to speak with you at the gate." Christine's professional mask was perfectly in place, revealing nothing. Dorothy felt the panic rising in her throat. Is this more trouble? Did Brewer call LAX security too? Was she going to be detained, questioned again, humiliated again in front of a whole new airport full of people? What people? Her voice came out higher than she intended. Did someone? If you could just wait, please. Christine was already turning to the next passenger, smile brightening. Welcome to Los Angeles. Enjoy your evening. Dorothy stood pressed against the galley wall, her backpack clutched to her chest like armor, watching the rest of the first-class passengers file past. Some glanced at her curiously. Most ignored her completely. She pulled out her cracked phone with shaking hands, thought about texting her father, then stopped. What would she even say? Held at gate again, not sure why, might be more trouble. The last passenger exited. The cabin fell silent except for the flight attendants efficiently moving through their post-flight duties. Miss Andrea? Christine gestured toward the door. You can proceed now. Dorothy stepped off the plane into the jetway, her legs feeling like water, her mind racing through every possible worst-case scenario. She had no idea that at gate 52B her father was waiting. Dorothy stepped off the aircraft into the jetway, her heart hammering against her ribs. The fluorescent lights were too bright after the dimmed cabin. She blinked, trying to adjust, trying to prepare herself for whatever fresh humiliation was about to unfold. What she saw made no sense. Her father stood 10 feet away, tall and imposing in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it wasn't just him. Behind Marcus Andrea stood two people in expensive suits carrying leather briefcases, lawyers, obviously. 3 Overland Airways security personnel in navy blazers, and 2 LAPD officers in uniform, their expressions professionally neutral. And then, off to the side, looking confused but still confident, was Thomas Brewer. Dorothy's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. Brewer was here. In Los Angeles. Why was Brewer here? Then her eyes found her father's face, and everything else disappeared. Marcus's expression when he saw her cradling her bruised wrist, her exhausted eyes ringed with dark circles, her cracked phone clutched in her other hand, made something in Dorothy's chest break open. Dad, she whispered and ran to him. Marcus caught her, wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time since the checkpoint at O'Hare, Dorothy felt safe. She pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing in the familiar smell of his cologne, feeling his hands smooth down her hair the way he'd done since she was a little girl. You're safe now, baby girl, Marcus murmured against her hair. I've got you. Dorothy nodded against his chest, not trusting her voice. Behind them, Brewer cleared his throat. The sound was loud in the jetway, artificially confident. Mr. Andrea, I presume? Marcus's hand on Dorothy's back tensed. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then slowly, deliberately, turned to face the security officer. His arm remained around Dorothy's shoulders, protective, anchoring. I'm Officer Thomas Brewer with Transecure Solutions, TSA Contract Security at O'Hare. Brewer's voice carried that same authoritative tone he'd used at the checkpoint, but there was an edge of uncertainty now. Your daughter was combative and attempted to bypass security protocols. I flew in to coordinate with LAX authorities because the situation requires. My daughter. Marcus's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. You put your hands on my daughter. Brewer blinked. Sir, with all due respect, she was attempting to access a restricted. Stop talking. Marcus took a step forward, his arm dropping from Dorothy's shoulders. You put your hands on my daughter. You shoved her to the ground. You humiliated her in front of hundreds of people. You flagged her as a criminal. You followed her to her gate. You poisoned the flight crew against her. Brewer's confident expression was starting to crack around the edges. Mr. Andrea, I don't think you understand the full situation. Your daughter. Wait. Brewer's face had gone very still. You're? Mr. Andrea, like? Andrea as in? His eyes darted from Marcus to the Overland Airways security personnel to the lawyers. The color began draining from his face. One of the lawyers, a slim Asian man in his 50s with steel-gray hair, stepped forward, opening his briefcase with practiced precision. Mr. Brewer, my name is Gerald Moss. I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Overland Airways. He extracted a business card and held it out. Brewer didn't take it. You are currently standing in an aircraft owned by Marcus Andrea. The airline you were contracted to protect, The airline whose passengers you were supposed to serve belongs to him. And the girl you assaulted at O'Hare International Airport is his daughter, Dorothy Andrea. The realization crashed over Brewer like a physical wave. His face went from pale to gray. His hand, which had been resting confidently on his belt, fell limply to his side. "You saw a young black woman in a hoodie," Marcus said, his voice still that terrible, quiet register. "And you decided she was a criminal. You decided she was lying. You decided she didn't belong. You decided she didn't deserve basic human dignity." He paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. "And then you put your hands on her." Marcus paused, letting the silence stretch. When he spoke again, his voice was measured, clinical, the voice of a man who'd built an empire by making calculated decisions. "Your contract with Transsecure Solutions and all airport security agencies is terminated effective immediately." He nodded to Gerald Moss, who produced a document. "Your employer received notice 40 minutes ago." Brewer's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "The LAPD officers here will be taking you into custody for assault and battery committed in Illinois. Chicago PD has issued a warrant for your arrest based on security footage, witness statements, and my daughter's testimony." Marcus gestured to the officers, who moved closer to Brewer's flanks. "Your name and actions are being reported to the Transportation Security Administration, Department of Homeland Security, and every private security firm in America. You will never work in security, law enforcement, or any position of authority again." Gerald handed Marcus another folder. "The industry blacklist is already circulating." Brewer was shaking his head, his hands coming up in a placating gesture. "Mr. Andrea, please, my legal team is filing a comprehensive civil suit for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of civil rights under both federal and state law. We will pursue every asset you have, your home, your pension, your savings. Whatever's left after the criminal fines will be ours." "I didn't know," Brewer's voice cracked. "I was just doing my job." And finally, Marcus continued as if Brewer hadn't spoken. "The security footage from O'Hare, your body camera footage, and witness statements are being compiled. Your actions, every moment of them, will be made public. People will know exactly who Thomas Brewer is and what he did." A woman stepped forward from the Overland Security Group, Asian, early 40s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper expression. "Mr. Brewer, I'm Sharon Way, head of corporate security for Overland Airways. I'm also placing you on the permanent no-fly list for Overland and our 46 partner airlines. You are banned from air travel on 47 carriers worldwide." Brewer looked like he might vomit. "Please, Mr. Andrea, I'm sorry. I have a family. I have a mortgage. I didn't know she was." Marcus stepped forward, close enough that Brewer instinctively backed up. "Your job was never to assault passengers. Your job was never to profile people based on the color of their skin or the clothes they wear. You failed at being a decent human being, Mr. Brewer, and now you'll face the consequences." He nodded to the LAPD officers. "He's all yours." The click of handcuffs echoed in the jetway. Passengers who'd been lingering at the gate, watching the scene unfold with their phones half raised, gasped and murmured. Brewer's face was the color of old ash as the officers read him his Miranda rights. Marcus turned away from Brewer. The man was already irrelevant, and scanned the small crowd. His eyes landed on a young man in a TSA uniform standing near the gate desk, his face pale but his expression resolute. Marcus recognized him from the security footage he'd reviewed. "Miguel Santos?" The young man straightened. "Yes, sir?" Marcus crossed to him, extending his hand. "You tried to do the right thing at O'Hare. You scanned my daughter's boarding pass when your superior was refusing to look at evidence. That takes courage." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. "If you're ever looking for a position in private security, Real Security, where integrity matters, call this number." Miguel took the card with shaking hands. "Thank you, sir. What he did wasn't right." "No," Marcus agreed. "It wasn't." Movement caught his eye. The Hendersons, who'd been watching from behind a pillar, were trying to slip away toward the terminal exit. Gerald Moss intercepted them smoothly, his second lawyer, a tall black woman with box braids, flanking him. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson?" Gerald's voice was polite ice. "Your Overland Airways Elite Rewards accounts have been terminated effective immediately, and you are permanently banned from flying with Overland and our partner airlines. We have multiple witness statements documenting your vocal encouragement of Mr. Brewer's assault and your discriminatory comments toward Ms. Andrea. Mrs. Henderson's face flushed crimson. This is ridiculous. We didn't do anything. You did nothing, Marcus said, turning to face them. Which, when you witness an assault, makes you complicit. But you did more than nothing. You encouraged it. You'll receive formal notification within 48 hours. The Hendersons fled. An hour later, Marcus and Dorothy sat in his Mercedes S-Class, pulling away from LAX toward their home in Pacific Palisades. Dorothy was in the passenger seat, her seatbelt on, her bruised wrist resting on her lap. The city lights blurred past the window. "Dad," she said quietly. "Thank you. But it feels like maybe too much. I mean, destroying his whole life. And then you put your hands on her." Marcus paused, letting the silence stretch. When he spoke again, his voice was clinical, the voice of a man who'd built an empire through calculated decisions. "Your contract with Transecure Solutions is terminated effective immediately. Your employer received notice 40 minutes ago." Brewer's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "The LAPD will take you into custody for assault and battery. Chicago PD has issued a warrant." Marcus nodded to the officers. "Your name is being reported to TSA, DHS, and every private security firm in America. You will never work in security again." Gerald Moss held up a folder. "We're filing civil suit for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil rights violations. We will pursue every asset, your home, pension, savings." "I didn't know," Brewer's voice cracked. "I was just doing my job. And the security footage, your body camera footage, and witness statements will be made public," Marcus continued. "People will know exactly who Thomas Brewer is." Sharon Way stepped forward. "Mr. Brewer, I'm head of corporate security for Overland Airways. You're on the permanent no-fly list for Overland and our 46 partner airlines, banned from 47 carriers worldwide." Brewer looked like he might collapse. "Please, I'm sorry. I have a family. I didn't know she was." Marcus moved closer. "Your job was never to assault passengers. Never to profile people based on skin color or clothing. You failed at being a decent human being, Mr. Brewer. Now face the consequences." The handcuffs clicked. Passengers gasped. Brewer's face went gray as officers read his rights. Marcus scanned the crowd, found Miguel Santos in his TSA uniform. "You tried to do the right thing at O'Hare. That takes courage." He handed him a card. "If you're looking for work in private security, where integrity matters, call me." Miguel's hands shook taking it. "Thank you, sir." The Hendersons were slipping away. Gerald intercepted them. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, your Overland Elite accounts are terminated and you're permanently banned from Overland and partner airlines. We have witness statements of your encouragement of Mr. Brewer's assault." Mrs. Henderson sputtered. "This is ridiculous." "You did nothing when you witnessed an assault," Marcus said. "Worse, you encouraged it. That makes you complicit." They fled. An hour later, Dorothy sat beside her father in his Mercedes, heading toward Pacific Palisades. The city lights blurred past. "Dad," she said quietly. "Thank you. But destroying his whole life, is that too much? He put his hands on you, baby girl. But I didn't do this just for you." Marcus glanced at her. "I did it for every person who looks like us who's been treated like they don't belong. Standards aren't maintained by cruelty, they're maintained by respect." Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "I was so scared to tell you. I thought I should handle it myself." Marcus reached over, squeezed her uninjured hand. "Asking for help isn't weakness. And you never have to face injustice alone, not while I'm breathing." Behind them, miles away at LAX, Thomas Brewer sat in a police car, handcuffed, his career destroyed, facing criminal charges. Through the window, he could see the Overland Airways planes taking off, planes he'd never board again, an empire he'd never understood he was crossing. Character isn't determined by the color of your skin or the price of your clothes. It's determined by how you treat others when you have the power to hurt them. Justice isn't always immediate. But when it comes, it's absolute.